Welcome. My name is Susan Shaner with Sage Leadership Strategies, LLC, and I'm your host this evening of Community Forum. And I have the great pleasure to have with me Lynn Carroll, who is an energy, body-oriented therapist. Welcome, Lynn.
Oh, thank you, Susan. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's so great to have you on the show. Now, I understand that you're based in Newtown, but you have clients that come from all over Fairfield County. Is that right?
Yes, yes. I've been in Newtown for almost 12 years, and I have clients from all over Fairfield County and beyond, too, but mostly Fairfield County.
Okay, wow. Can you give us an overview of your background, you know, how long you've been in the area, and maybe your educational background as well?
Oh, sure. Sure. Well, actually, I grew up in Westport, and I can remember when there were cows on the post road.
Really?
Instead of cars at stores. But anyway, I grew up in Westport, went to school in upstate New York at Skidmore, and received a Bachelor of Arts at Skidmore. And I studied architectural history. Wow. And it was really fascinating because it was really kind of like studying the sacred sites. And I really enjoyed that. And then I was in the business world for some time until 1993. And then I went back to school and received my license in massage therapy, and then received my master's at Fairfield University in counseling. So it's kind of been an eclectic mix of you know, various.
Well, that's interesting. From architectural history to massage therapy. So it sounds like, is there a connection there? You're saying studying the sacred sites?
It's kind of similar. I'd say there's similarities in studying kind of the energy of what a place feels like, and then working with that kind of the physical aspects of it, whether it's architecture or whether I was working physically with the body. There's kind of a sense of one's energy that you can pick up from working in that capacity. Like, have you ever been to a place and it feels really good, and you really get excited and feel a connection with that place, or you look at a beautiful sunset and you think, oh, that's just really inspiring. So it's that same kind of feeling that kind of drew me into this.
So kind of the feeling of it.
Type of work, yes, the sensation, actually having a sensory experience of it.
Interesting. So you sort of characterize yourself as an energy, body-oriented therapist. Now, I'm sure some of our viewers maybe don't really know a lot about therapy, or maybe have never gone to a therapist. In particular, energy, body-oriented. Can you tell us what you mean by that and what that all encompasses?
Well, good question. Normally we think of therapy and we think of talk therapy, and that's really the way it's been for the last, since Freud, the last 50, 100 years. And now there's a trend of integration going on with talk therapy, which can be extremely effective, but that there's other ways to reach different parts of ourselves. And so there's an emotional aspect to us, which talk therapy can address, but when we say body-based, it's on a different level of experience. It's actually experiencing one's emotions. There's the physical level that when we have challenges presented to us in sometimes everyday situations, we feel and experience these emotions, or we feel adrenaline running through our system. So there's a lot of information the body can house, and with energy-based therapy, what you're working with is the talk therapy aspect of it, but you're also working with the mental field, the emotional field, the physical field, and the energetic piece of sensory experience to bring up whatever it is that needs to be revealed. So the experience is more revelatory, and it provides insight on a lot of different levels. So the beauty of it is that you're accessing these different levels, and they're integrating as a result of bringing awareness to these different areas.
That's interesting. I mean, I know with Freud, even sort of the father of therapy, right? It's psychotherapy as we know it, but I know that he found that a lot of his clients maybe had intellectual insight, but they still didn't get better. So even though they could intellectually understand what was going on with them.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also somebody who's done a lot of work whose name is Bessel van der Kolk. And he...
What's his name?
Bessel van der Kolk.
Okay.
He is a psychiatrist. He actually lectures across the, world-renowned, and he did a lot of work with World War II vets. And one of the things that he found is that talk therapy wasn't as effective because there were really deep aspects that were almost on the cellular level, from part of their sensory experience. So you know how you can intellectually understand something, but until you experience it, you really don't understand it. You might understand it on the mental level, but you haven't experienced it on the emotional level or on the physical level. So you can imagine what something would be like, but you really don't know what it's like until you're in that place.
So is this like a visceral kind of experience? Or?
Yeah, it can be. Oftentimes people will experience things in their body. For example, heat and tingling, coldness, maybe vibrations and pulsations, because what happens is our body how we're wired is that our body needs to release the energy that's been blocked from some of the challenges that we can face and traumatic situations that have happened in our lives, and or even challenges in our lives that trigger responses. So, for example, if you get into an argument with your boss, and that interaction reminds you of what used to happen with your mother or your father when you were young, and that was a very challenging situation for you. You can feel sometimes tension in the body, you can feel that kind of rush of adrenaline, you can feel that rush of anger that can come up from that experience. So what this kind of therapy works with is how can we release what's been locked up in the body to alleviate those symptoms, which can be quite uncomfortable and can make us behave in ways that we don't want to and that we don't feel good about ourselves.
Yeah. So does it deal a lot with trauma, like emotional, physical trauma?
Yeah, and it does. And when you say trauma, sometimes we can assume that sometimes we jump to conclusions that something really horrible has to have happened to us, and there's all different levels of trauma. So what I like to say is trauma and challenges, situations that have challenged us.
Well, I remember reading something recently where somebody was saying, because when I hear the word trauma, I think, life-threatening, but there can be everyday things that can be traumatic, even though we don't really want to use that word trauma because it sounds like we're over-dramatizing or something.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because trauma, I think, sounds like it has to be catastrophic, whereas it's a word that describes something that's come in that's violated our boundaries on some level.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be large. It doesn't, it's powerful. It doesn't have to be really a large catastrophe for that to happen. It can be something that might appear simple, yet it was felt and experienced as something very deep, very profound, very palpable by the body.
So it doesn't necessarily matter what the exact event is, it's more how the person is receiving it. Can you give us an example of what would be seemingly everyday-ish but could be traumatic for somebody?
Yeah, there's something that comes to mind before I give you an example of that. Peter Levine, who wrote a book called Waking the Tiger, I think made a brilliant statement, and that is that trauma is not in the event, it's in the nervous system. And so in other words, our body and our nervous system, it has what happens, in everyday life has an impact on us, and those traumatic situations have a deep impact on us, and that energy can get locked into our bodies. So you asked me for an example of what kinds of things. Okay, let's see. So if someone, well, I don't know if this, I was just thinking of the example that I had mentioned before about a person who's getting into an argument with somebody, or let's say, let's say someone's checking out at a grocery store, and the cashier who's checking them out makes a nasty comment, and the person who's going through the checkout line, reacts and all of a sudden raises their voice and gets really angry and really irate. So whether you take that situation, or you take road rage, which which is such a common thread in this country. What we're seeing there is a nervous system that gets highly activated, and we've all been there. We've all been those places.
And the person behind them saying, what's the big deal? Why are they overreacting? But clearly it activated something in them that wasn't about that particular moment.
Right, yeah.
It was touching on something that happens somewhere else.
That they may or may not even be aware of. So that could trigger some memories, perhaps, of childhood when they weren't allowed to get what they want, and it created a lot of anger and rage. So this person, this cashier, is kind of representing something they weren't able to get, and still, on some level, feeling, kind of acting out. Okay. To try to release that. So now, how would you go about working with somebody? I know you said that you've got this training as a counselor therapist, massage therapist. Right. You've talked about energy work and this being integrative in some way. So how do you bring this all together? Okay, good question. The other aspect is somatic experiencing, which is the model that I mentioned before that Peter Levine developed, which is really kind of the integration of talk therapy with energy work from a very sensory perspective, like we've been talking about. So when you say somatic experience, really experiencing something in your body. Right, experiencing something in the body, and then working with language to understand what it is that's going on within the body, within the mental realm, within the emotional realm, to gain insight as to understanding what the behavior's about, what the feelings about, what the mental thoughts are about. How this works is, if someone comes to me, what's important to do is kind of assess what it is their intention is for the session, what their goal is in therapy. So based on what it is I'm hearing from them, I work with what I find is I can kind of get a sense of where it might be important to start. Some people might have, no idea in terms of where to start. And so depending on what the issue is will determine what the modality is. Okay. Some people will come in and they'll say, I just want to, I would like a therapy session. I just would like to talk to you about some issues that I'm having. So then we might one week do talk therapy, but then the next week perhaps do energy work, and then maybe the week after do somatic experiencing. So it depends what's coming up for them and how they're responding to it. So if someone feels really uncomfortable in their body, for example, or there's been a lot of stress, I might get the sense that it would be more appropriate to work with massage and combine that with some energy work. So when you say talk therapy, like we're doing here, that's pretty obvious. But when you say energy or somatic experience, like what does that look like? Somebody's on a table, or are they sitting here? Well, actually, they have options. So they can choose whether they feel more comfortable sitting on a couch or more comfortable lying on a massage table, which I have. So if we're doing energy work or massage, obviously the table is the best resource to use for that. But for the somatic experiencing piece, that can be either. So it's not that, like with energy work, most forms of energy work, you're utilizing light touch on the body.
So somebody for the energy or somatic experience, unlike the massage, they'd be fully clothed, lying on the table, and you may or may not like light touch. Like, okay.
Right, exactly. So with somatic experiencing, I can introduce light touch if that's appropriate and it's okay with them. Asking permission is important, but it doesn't have to be a session where there's any touch at all, and they can still very much experience what's happening in their body throughout the session. Because what happens with trauma, or when we get really into challenging situations, is we tend to think that we don't experience ourselves as having any options. And
so kind of a freeze, kind of
exactly,
can't go anywhere.
Right. We go into a fight response or a flight response or a freeze response, and in that place, it's hard to know that we have any other choices.
Yeah.
So by slowing the process down and looking at what it is that's been threatening to us on so many different levels, then we can understand and gain insight from that experience, and often that can alleviate the symptoms that come up that have been from that particular trauma that have been acted out in present day.
So just by being aware of what the sensations are?
Yeah, being aware of what the sensations are, but the sensations often lead us to different places. So there might be an image that comes in where there's an association made of something in childhood. Or there might be a symbol that comes in that has a lot of meaning, and then all of a sudden that individual is filled with a lot of insight in terms of what developed and why things happened the way they did, and there's more acceptance around that particular situation that's been really difficult for them to digest, because they're able to see it and experience it from an entirely different perspective that they didn't have before.
Yeah. So I know things like car accidents, surgeries, I mean, that can produce trauma too. I mean, I know I had a car accident I'm fine now, but a couple months ago, and I had whiplash and everything.
Right.
But just kind of remembering that, it sort of tenses me up a little bit, like,
That's exactly it. That's a perfect example. So the body feels that, okay, it's survival, and in a way it's really served us incredibly well. We need that response. Where it gets us into, where it takes us into a different realm is when we are continually responding from that place. It becomes a loop, and we those symptoms aren't released, and then they manifest on other levels.
So if you're stuck.
Exactly.
So you talked a lot about how it helps integrate on levels other than mental and talking. So you've talked a lot on the sensory level, the physical level, the emotional level. Are there any other things you would say that would speak to the benefits of taking more of an integrated approach? Such as this?
Yeah, good point. It's really interesting. People begin to see themselves in an entirely different way, and that is what's so fulfilling. Another part that's so fulfilling for me about this work is that it helps them to connect with the sense of self, and there's there's an amazing spiritual component to it, because when that individual connects to a place where they find peace, and they connect with a goodness within them, working through whatever it is that they're working through, that's an amazing space where healing's taking place, where there's transformation. So it can be such a revelatory process and incredibly insightful.
More so than with just the talk.
I found talk helpful, but I found it to kind of penetrate into deeper levels because of that sensory experience, which is we are all human. We all
Yeah.
have physical bodies. We all have we all have sensory experience. And when these levels start to integrate the physical with the emotional and the mental, and they start to line up and be congruent, there's a coherency that takes place. And that's a place of magic, where they're able to see themselves and experience themselves in a totally different place.
So
And
more
it's-
whole,
Exactly.
So
Absolutely.
when you use the word spiritual, you made reference to feeling more of a sense of self, more peace. Other ways you refer to the spiritualityness of it? Is it connecting to other people as well? Or?
Yeah, good point. It's almost as if they feel connected, very connected to who they are, and because they're feeling relatively safe, there's a natural tendency when we feel safe to be able to kind of expand our boundaries and be able to accept situations and take in other people and other relationships that normally might have felt a little threatening, because we're in a better place and we're seeing ourselves from a whole different view. We have a different relationship to ourselves.
Yeah.
And with that changes the relationship we have with others around us.
So more connecting to themselves, they're better able to connect with others in the broader world.
Yeah.
Wow. So it sounds like
Yeah.
this would be extraordinarily fulfilling in that you have the potential to have a profound impact on people's lives.
Yeah. It is. It's incredibly rewarding. It really, I absolutely love the work.
And do you mostly work just one-on-one with individuals, or you do groups also?
Well, I work one-on-one and I do groups as well.
So you could do this modality with groups? I don't know if that's the right word, but...
It can be
apply.
done with groups. I teach groups to work in this capacity. It's a little tricky to work with the different modalities within the group itself, but it's also very rewarding for me to teach groups, and we have something called healing days where we'll work on people with a variety of different illnesses.
So you teach practitioners, other people to do this work? Is that what you're
Right.
saying? Okay.
Right.
So we have a few more minutes. I'm wondering if you could, if I could ask this, if you could take us through just a little anonymous case study of maybe one of your more successful treatments.
Yeah.
Just give us a brief overview on that.
Okay, yeah, this is profound. There was a woman who came to me, this was about 2-3 years ago, and she was scheduled, she had a lump on her breast, and she was scheduled for a biopsy the next day. And so she came, when she came, she was, obviously that's
Big.
trauma.
Yeah.
That's a lot of anxiety. So we worked a great deal. We did a combination of the somatic experiencing and the energy work, really, kind of the integration of the two. And it was really amazing because there was, we both were experiencing at the same time a lot of density that she felt in the body, and there were connections that she was making with things that happened in her childhood, and some very profound connections that she was making. And by the end of the session, there was, she experienced feeling a great deal of lightness, and not only did she feel physically lighter, but it was almost just, she was seeing kind of an image of lightness. And,
Wow.
and so she left feeling really good and just feeling that strong connection with the self.
Excuse
Bless
me.
you.
Lightness tickled my ear. Go ahead.
And so, so the next, so she called me the next night. I said, so how did everything go? And she said, I didn't need to do the biopsy.
What?
The lump disappeared. It was gone. She went to the hospital, and the doctor she told the doctor that the lump wasn't there anymore. The doctor looked, they checked her out.
She felt like after the session with you, is that
yeah,
the lump? Wow.
the next morning. Now, I'm not saying
this was a more radical. This is not like everybody's going to come in and have
Right,
this.
right. And nor do I want to make any claims.
Right, right. This was an extraordinary case.
Yeah.
The average person just feels a little bit better.
Right.
Is that, wow.
Like, yeah, on a lot of different levels. So this was really, really powerful. And that was really a life-changing experience for her.
Wow, that must have been.
It changed her life on you know, some really radical ways. And so it's nice to witness those miracles.
As a practitioner, that must have been very rewarding.
Yeah,
it's like
like
in some way.
Absolutely, it's like watching grace come in, and to be able to witness and observe that is just such a privilege and an honor.
Wow. So.
Yeah.
I didn't expect you to give us a case like that. It's pretty big.
It was really powerful. It was important for me to see, too, because we need to know our work's effective.
That there's something to this.
Exactly, exactly. Otherwise, why bother doing what we do? There needs to be a purpose.
Yeah. So we've got about another minute. For our viewers who have never done anything like this, and this may sound out there, and now with this case study, but maybe they're a little curious. What would you say if they were interested in exploring something like this?
I think what's important is to just be receptive, to be open, to learn what it is that, you know, to kind of take that step to learn something about yourself, and to make that step not be a big step, to work with what feels comfortable for you. So whether it's starting off with massage and a little bit of energy work, or maybe just the energy work until you feel comfortable, because that's really important to feel safe and to be able to work with where you're at instead of overriding our sense of what feels comfortable, which we do a lot in our society today.
So an initial first step, maybe massage after the talk therapy.
Yeah, maybe massage, or if they're drawn to energy work, whatever they feel is, oh, okay, I can try this, and I think I can feel okay with this.
Okay. Yeah. So in ending, a headline. What do you see as a vision for your work?
Oh,
that's a big question to end with, but.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I want to support people in their ability to profoundly change and support their freedom to make choices and have options that support who they are and their spirituality.
Wow, big vision.
Yeah.
So, Lynn, thank you. This was incredibly interesting and fascinating, actually. So thank you for joining us tonight. And
Susan,
I know you're based in the
me.
Newtown area.
Yes, I'm based in Newtown.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Until next time, I'm Susan Shaner with Community Forum.